All right, friends, we're here to talk about 3 steps to create awesome client-focused content. And they're not hard, really. They're not hard. But before we get started, can we just acknowledge for a second that content is really anything you're creating? That funnel, it's content. The email you sent your client to onboard last week, that is content. All the things that you're putting out there is content. But when it comes to creating good content that brings in good leads, turn into revenue for your business, there's a lot of questions. And what to say, where to say it, when to say it, right? So it kind of feels like you need your own personal Nostradamus after all of that. And that's hard. So I'm here to take the ambiguity out of all of that. There's really only 3 things that you need to nail to create great content. That not only does create that good content, but does it in a way that doesn't take over your life and your client facing time. So to do that, you want your strategy, your measurement in your system, and the daily what to say. Now, before I dive into those 3 things, I do want to tell you a short story about the mooching neighborhood squirrels that I've been dealing with lately. So we've had a kind of a rough spring here in the PNW, but back in March, we'd had a glorious month, and I was like, it's time to go plant my bulbs. And I did. I had purchased a bunch of peony and dahlia bulbs. I wanted lots of really pretty, lush flowers in the garden, and I did do that. I unfortunately did it right after doing a really heavy weightlifting day at the gym. So the next morning, I woke up like wiped. I was sore. I'd been squatting and, leaning over while doing all the bulbs after doing the exact same thing at the gym. And my muscles were like not having any of it. It was rough. I went from that over to my friend's house and, was moaning to her that afternoon how sore I was that I overdid it. And while I was there, my husband called and he was like, "Did you see the front yard?" "No, honey, I did not. I'm at my friend's house." He was like, "Yeah, the squirrels, I think, dug up all the work that you did yesterday." And I was devastated because not only had I spent a bunch of money on those bulbs, but I was sore, man. It was like a minute by minute reminder of all the work that I'd poured into it. And I was so upset. Now, I called my friend, Mary Lane. She's like my gardening guru friend. And she was actually coming over anyway to divide some of those peonies. But she was telling me how a year ago, the same thing happened to her. She and our mutual friend, Steph, planted hundreds of tulip bulbs all over her neighborhood. They just wanted to cheer people up in a very COVID, downturn, right? In kind of a crappy time period. And Steph, our friend, she's since passed. And Mary Lane had experienced the exact same thing with the squirrels just totally digging up things. She saw it like eating out husks of the tulip bulbs all over her neighborhood. Until this year, our friend passes, and just a few weeks later, those tulip bulbs start sprouting up everywhere. And it was like this little blessing, right? This little reminder that all that work that she'd put in wasn't necessarily all in vain. Did they all come up? No. Some were definitely dug up and eaten, but enough of them came up to remind her that sometimes that work you pour into takes a little while to start working. And it won't all work, but it's going to eventually get there. So she gave me that story as kind of like a little reminder that I did do all this work, and maybe some of it was for nothing, right? But I would be pleasantly surprised by how much did start sprouting. And now, 2 months later, we're now in the middle of May or so. So 2 months later, I am starting to see a few of those dahlia sprites come up, and I'm really excited about it because it means that not only one, it wasn't all in vain, but that does happen. And that's our story leading into talking about the 3 things. And you're gonna catch this in just a minute. Planting seeds and creating content have a lot in common if you've nailed these 3 ingredients. So the first is knowing your best client intimately in the least creepy way possible. And I don't mean your ideal client avatar. I have a huge rant against that particular term. It's jargony. It puts up a wall between you and your audience, and there's no need for it. Knowing your best client just means knowing what their goals, desires, anxieties, and hurdles are. If you want more information on how to do that, you're going to want to check out Best Client Builder. It is a very low cost, entry level kind of product that I have on my website that helps you walk through how to build a best client profile. And it's not going to be like, oh, she's 25 and she drives this kind of car and her hair is brown. It's not going to be that. I'm telling you right now, you can work with both women and men. You can work with 25-year-olds and 55-year-olds. Really, it is okay. The commonality of your best client is that they have a particular problem they urgently want solved, and you are really good and efficient at fixing that problem. Where those things uniquely meet, that is your best client. And their demographics might not be the same one to the next. But when you know them really intimately, when you can kind of voice their thoughts and worries before they have a chance to even put them out, they start considering you to be a genius in their world, and you become a go-to resource for them, and eventually probably a paying client is what they will become. All right, so that's number one. Number two is tying in personal but relevant stories that make your business lessons relatable. And if you think that squirrel story was just there for entertainment funsies, you're wrong. It's important, and we're going to get to it in a minute. The third is balancing the kinds of content that you publish. If you notice, I said publish. I did not say create. You're going to continue creating one new big content piece every week, or whatever works for your particular life and schedule. That's important. But the kinds of content that you publish can be balanced. You can start repurposing old, you can add in shared content, you can include some life personal details. I cover all of this in my old, new, balanced, old, new, borrowed, and blue philosophy. I talk about that in my podcast episode number 181. To get to that, you can go to brittneygardner.com/181 very easily. Or I can include a link as well for that. But that in detail is covered there. The idea, though, is that you are balancing the kinds of content that you are publishing on a regular basis. It takes the pressure off of you to constantly be creating. Hello, get your life back, get off that content creation hamster wheel. But it also gives you a way to kind of move forward and create really good client-focused content in a nice, balanced way. So those are the three things that you want to nail to make sure that you're creating that client-focused content. And with that said, we're going to come back to that squirrel story, right? If you think of content like seeds, it is easier to approach creation. Some seeds germinate, and others, even with the best of intentions, they just don't. So the germinated content is what you repurpose. If you're measuring your content, if you have a content measurement dashboard or you're manually measuring, you're going to know what content is germinating. You're going to know what content is bringing leads into your business. So that germinated content is what you repurpose. And that's when content planning gets easier, because you can rely on that old content in a big way to carry out your daily stuff. That way, the new content you create, you can start interspersing there. You can still source good borrowed content and give new context and use it to deepen the lessons that you're already putting out there. And you can include a little bit of that life fun stuff, that out of the blue stuff, in a way that balances with that hard hitting old content and testing out new content. All right, guys, I hope that helps. If you need help with any of this, I already gave you a few resources. The Old, New, Borrowed, Blue episode is podcast episode number 181. Knowing your best client, the best client builder. And if you need help with that actual repurposing process, if you need like the actual system, you can go to the Show Up system. And if you need help approaching your old content with new perspectives, I highly recommend the Be Seen method. All of these products and resources are either free or available for very low prices. These are not high ticket programs, right on my website.